As a sports fan, I have to confess. Sometimes the game gets kind of boring. That's when I unfold my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7 and use multi-window viewing on its large screen. Boring game? I'm checking out my fantasy baseball league at the same time. Score still 1-0? I'm replying to emails in the other window, scoring points with the boss. Semifinals finally getting exciting? I'm buying tickets to the finals and booking my flights. Can your phone do that?
The new Galaxy Z Fold 7. Get yours at Samsung.com.
Quiet Riot. Hello, and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the budgie smuggler cousin to our midweek Victorian swimming costume. I'm Naomi.
And I'm Kenny. How's your weekend going, Naomi? Did you get much sleep?
Well, I've got my fluffy companion, Wrigley, the dog, who is also trying to slumber beside me right now, but he keeps growling because lots of other people are out with their dogs and he can hear them outside, and he gets a little bit territorial and growls away. So apologies, listeners, if you get any background woofing and grumbling.
It's just an age he's at. All us blokes get like that. When we get to that grumpy old man stage. Well done, Wrigley. Well done. Get a pipe and slippers.
How are you?
Do you remember handymen that used to phone somebody up and they'd come and make everything work in your house?
Yeah, now there's like TaskRabbit and things like that.
That's right. So we've got this little old, he's fashion called little old, but that's kind of how he is. He's called Adrian. And Adrian rocked up this week because we needed some work done on a window. Anyway, every job that sort of showed him, he went, yeah, no problem at all. You should do this, you should do this, you should do this. Yeah. Ripped the windowsill out, boom, knocked a hole in the wall, put an air brick in, took the bottom half of a window off, is rebuilding that, he's putting units in. But everything is done with the most lovely smile. It's just such a nice reminder that there are properly nice people out there doing properly good jobs. But it was kind of like 1973 had knocked on the front door and said, I can make the new world good. So heads up, big up to Adrian, the Topsham handyman.
People who can actually do things and have proper jobs like that do make me feel incredibly inadequate.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Like, I feel proud of myself when I change a light bulb.
It's one thing the AI is not going to be able to do anytime soon, is it? Rock up in a little van, pop out with a stepladder and a bag of tools and say, don't worry, I'm going to make your life better. A special thank you, as ever, to those of you who support us in Ko-Fi. We never charge for our content, but your donations are a huge help when it comes to paying the bills. If you do feel the urge, please head over to ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod to sign up for a few quid and help us keep things going swimmingly.
And so that Kenny can continue to pay Adrian, who I would imagine charges a premium in 2025 when most of us are so effing useless at doing minor DIY around the home.
Give him ideas.
And listeners, don't forget, we have a curated bookshop featuring works by some of our guests, by other people who we admire, and the link is in the show notes. And all sales support great authors, local independent retailers, and of course, this show.
Hey, nice one. Now, what political morsels shall we chew over today? I suppose we ought to play up Trump's latest round of, well, I was going to say tariff bingo, but actually America's wobbling economy looks to be much more significant amid Trump's other ongoing wobbles, of course.
Yeah, no, we definitely need to unpick that and find out how the Swiss are coping with their pretty hefty tariff slap. I thought maybe we should nibble at the government plan to make the civil service internship scheme a working class privilege.
Good call.
That was announced by Pat McFadden earlier this week. So a really kind of interesting philosophical one for us all to mull over, I'd say.
Cracking. And if we've got time, have you got a third topic?
I do, and it's courtesy of good friend of the show, Luke Trill, over at More in Common. I'm going to let you know about some polling they've done that I think is particularly interesting. And actually, it was something that I'd hoped to poll in a slightly different way a couple of months ago and didn't have the funding to manage. So I'm really pleased they've done it. And and we'll chew over that. So we'll keep that one under wraps till we get there. Make you listen all the way to the end.
Fabulous. Let's do this.
Quiet, riot.
In Donald Trump's never-ending battle with reality, reality is finally starting to fight back. Hurrah! In a week pockmarked by all sorts of man-baby madness, from a new White House ballroom to Trump entering the dicking about with nuclear submarines phase of his presidency, some extremely suboptimal economic data came out, and what it showed was that America should be very worried about the state of its finances. Now, Trump responded in his usual way by telling a load of lies about the woman who heads up the agency responsible for publishing American economic data, and then saying he was firing her. Of course he was. There's a lot to unpack, and we're not going to be able to cover all of this today, but I thought it might be revealing to highlight how Trump is not the only problem that the US economy faces.
President, why did you fire the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics? Because I think her numbers were wrong. Just like I thought her numbers were wrong before the election. Days before the election, she came out with these beautiful numbers for Kamala. I guess Biden/Kamala. And she came out with these beautiful numbers.
Going forward, why should anyone trust the numbers?
Well, that's
and
the
if
big thing. You're right. No, you're right. Why should anybody trust numbers? I believe the numbers were phony, just like they were before the election. And there were other times. So you know what I did? I fired her.
Yeah. So, Kenny, what are the kind of headline economic warning signs coming out of the US at the moment?
The headlines are quite bleak. Jobs growth over there has flatlined. The number of job gains in July was 73,000, and they'd expected a lot more than that. They expected way over 100,000 job gains.
Well, yeah, because he's onshoring jobs, and that's the whole point of the tariffs, right?
Yep.
And
exactly.
Liberation Day, it was meant to make everyone invest in the US and create jobs there. So what's gone wrong?
Well, that's right. Well, lots has gone wrong, and we're going to come to AI in a second because it's had a role to play, and it's quite a big role to play, actually. One of the other issues that Trump had was that the figures for May and June were revised as well. That's one of the things that got him wound up about the Statistics Agency. And when they revisited the figures to make them more accurate, they slashed another 258,000 jobs from previously reported figures. Experts are saying that the revisions that took these 250,000 jobs out of the figures follow routine methodology. There's no sabotage going on here.
And there's no seasonal variation. They smooth that out, don't they, when they look at the data, so that, if you've got a particular spike because of a particular weather event made everyone go out and buy umbrellas or sun cream or whatever, they smooth that out to try and make it look a bit more reasonable.
That's right, they do. And I mean, they've got some particular problems over there in doing that. One of which is that a lot of the data was skewed when Trump started playing tariff bingo at the beginning of the year. A lot of companies started bringing supplies onshore that they wouldn't normally have brought onshore until later in the year. Yeah. So they've got a lot of work to do. There's another issue in America, and polling geeks among our audience might be familiar with this one, but it's Americans don't like taking part in surveys. So when agencies that are tasked with coming up with robust data go out and try to find Americans to talk to, it's difficult, and it's getting more and more difficult. So not only are the figures wrong, it's getting harder and harder to get figures that are trustworthy. The thing is, if you get figures that are trustworthy and then you get fired for your troubles, kind of what's the point?
Yeah, because he said on Truth Social that they were a complete mistake. He said, in my opinion, today's job numbers are rigged in order to make Republicans and me look bad. I just don't think he can have it both ways, right? Because he also said similar things happen in the first part of the year, always to the negative. The economy is booming under Trump. Yeah. Talking about himself in the third person in the weird way.
You would if you were Trump. I'd talk about myself in the third person as well.
Who he? And I don't think you can have it both ways, because if the economy is booming and potentially therefore overheating, then he would be pushing the Fed to raise interest rates. And of course, that is the opposite of what he's doing. So conventional economic wisdom is really not his forte.
No, I mean, wisdom is really not his forte.
Yeah.
We can go broad brush on this particular character assassination, and it's not a character assassination, is it? This is all veritas, my lad.
Yeah.
I mean, the point you make about the figures, you know, the Q1 figures and such is valid. You know, in the first quarter, annualized growth, I think, was up by about 3%, largely driven, I think, by what I mentioned before about people taking action ahead of tariffs. The first half of the year, GDP in the States has only gone up by between 1.1 and 1.2%. I mean, that's tepid. That really is. And it's been utterly buried by declining domestic investment and by wobbling consumption as well. Consumers are getting very windy as well.
And also, cost of living remains incredibly high. You know, food prices are stubbornly high, and price of eggs that he famously campaigned on have gone up, not down. And the Evening Standard did a big piece this week about loads of New Yorkers leaving to come to London to escape Trump, and because of the lower cost of living now relative to their earnings. Yes, London absolutely is. For the rest of us, absolutely freaking not. I really want to get into the AI aspect of it because it's so interesting how it's changed. You've now got a situation where CEOs are boasting to investors about job cuts. So reducing headcount, which was once a signal of trouble, layoffs, oh no, you're having to make cutbacks, costs are out of control, you know, company not being productive, going to have to, you know, maybe rethink what we would pay for a share in that company, et cetera, is now completely 180'd with CEOs going in front of investors and saying, we've managed to cut the workforce, we're shrinking it, and our productivity has gone up, and they're all claiming that it's AI that's doing it. So, you know, you've had like Verizon, you've had Amazon, so many of them, Loomis, loads of them talking about how they've managed to cut headcount by, you know, really, really significant numbers.
Yeah, huge numbers.
Yeah, like 23%, that kind of thing. We really are now beginning to see the virtue for investors for AI coming in and taking jobs. But where does that leave people? I mean, large scale layoffs are, of course, only going to make all of these jobs figures more accurate, despite what Trump is telling us, and Americans feeling much, much, much less secure in their purchasing power, their quality of life, etc. So it really is such an incredibly quick pace of change happening that we're not readjusting to by offering alternatives like a universal basic income to compensate.
No, and that's not going to happen in Trump's America. No way. I mean, AI, I saw a report earlier this week I wrote this down actually, I loved the name of the company that did the report. They're called Challenger Gray and Christmas.
Oh, wow.
That's very Dickensian. There's going to be a twist in that particular tale, but they're an outplacement firm. They said that the sort of increase in adoption of generative AI in the private sector, at least, has led directly alone to 10,000 jobs lost recently. And they were quite straightforward. They said AI is now one of the top 5 reasons for job losses this year. And the technology industry, ironically enough, is of course seeing some of the fiercest cuts. Private companies in that sector have shed something like 89,000 jobs, I think, off the top of my head.
Yeah.
It's hurting real people in the pocket. And of course, when you put people out of a job, the local sandwich shops suffer, the other shops suffer. You know, there's a spiral effect.
Quiet Riot. Now, this episode is sponsored by Shopify.
Why Shopify? Well, when we started Quiet Riot, there was so much we had to figure out on our own. Even though we'd both got plenty of experience appearing on podcasts, starting our own from scratch threw up a lot of challenges, from finding studios and designing logos to wrestling with contracts and dealing with platforms.
And on a show like this, the to-do list, I can assure you, is never ever done. And getting help is essential. Otherwise, the process of creating a show can drain the joy of putting out a podcast that we are so proud of.
For some challenges, that means reaching out to friends who can point us in the right direction, hopefully with a smile and an encouraging pat on the back. But for others, you just need the right tool for a particular job.
For millions of businesses, one of those tools is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands like ours just getting started. As we're developing our thinking about Quiet Riot branded merchandise, Shopify was the first name that came to mind to manage the whole process for us.
It's straightforward enough to get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify can help you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style.
It can accelerate your content creation too. Shopify is packed with helpful tools that help you write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography.
Plus, you can get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. It's easy to create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling.
Best of all, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and more. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify.
So turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your £1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.co.uk/quietriot. Go to shopify.co.uk/quietriot. That's shopify.co.uk/quietriot.
Quiet Riot.
There's another side to the AI equation. There is so much money being spent on AI that it's acting as a private sector stimulus, if you like, to the American economy. So if you think the figures are bad at the moment, you just have to imagine how awful they would be if the AI bubble had never happened, or if it was to pop. They call them the Magnificent Seven, the seven big tech industries. In the last 3 months, just the last 3 months, those seven have spent more than $100 billion on data centers and chips and all the other associated stuff that goes with it. $100 billion in the space of 3 months. As a percentage of GDP, that helps us sort of strip out things like inflation and everything. Spending on AI infrastructure is already way ahead of the spending that was happening on things like telecoms and internet infrastructure during the dot-com boom.
Yeah.
And we know how that ended. And it's still growing.
And a lot of them are middle management roles that are going. So Intel CEO are planning to lay off 15% of their staff, and it's going to be mostly middle management that they're getting rid of. As I understand it, Microsoft have at least acknowledged the human costs. So they're going to cut another 9,000 workers, and that will mean it's job cuts of 15,000 just in the last 8 weeks. And the CEO, Satya Nadella, was very empathetic in writing a memo to staff saying that the layoffs had weighed heavily on him.
Do these people never get anybody in to explain the basics of communication? Either don't make it about yourself, mate. Nobody cares.
Oh, and they're blaming it entirely on AI as they reorient it towards AI doing most of these jobs.
A bad robot made me do it.
Exactly. Nadella wrote, "This is the enigma of success in an industry that has no franchise value. Progress isn't linear. It's dynamic, sometimes dissonant, and always demanding."
Ooh, do you know what jumps out at me at that little quote? Enigma. That word has all of a sudden become utterly toxic. Trump used it when he was talking to his very good buddy Epstein.
Yeah,
and it's creeping into conversations in the wrong places.
And the reality, particularly in America, is that these people then immediately lose access to healthcare.
Yeah.
And so do their children and other dependents. And, it's just heartbreaking and absolutely not something that we should go anywhere near Wes Streeting, please. Okay, so the backdrop of all of this, of course, is the firing, because in the US, it's a different system here. You've got these senior statisticians within US government that are they serve at the, quote, pleasure of the president, meaning if they publish something the president doesn't like, he can just get rid of them without fear or favor. Talk us through the firing of McIntyre and what's happened with her.
Well, I mean, it really was a guillotine job. Trump didn't like the figures, needed somebody to blame. Boom.
She was originally appointed by the Senate 86-8 in January 2024 for a 4-year term.
Yeah, and when she was appointed, she got the backing of people including J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, hardcore MAGA operators. So, she's a respected bipartisan technocrat.
Yeah.
These are people that operate in what we would call sort of grey jobs or vanilla jobs, choose your colour, but they are not headline seekers. They're the bedrock of an awful lot of what goes on in business. And they quietly, up until now, go about doing their job. There isn't any advantage in them playing politics. They're not political creatures. Their job very much up until now depends on them not playing politics because they have to be trusted.
And you've got ratings agencies like Moody's saying that the BLS data, the data that she oversees, is at the highest standard and as accurate as can be, and warned that their head warned that countries that fake statistics end up with economic crises as a result.
Completely. The large revisions in figures that happen from organizations like BLS are utterly routine, and they're driven by delayed data updates. These organizations learn more as weeks and months pass, and they update their figures accordingly. The big challenge for America, one of the big challenges for America, is that in firing the BLS chief and in becoming nakedly political around an issue like statistics, in the same way he's been nakedly political around universities and the law and every other damn thing that he wanders in and destroys, what he's going to do is start to erode quite quickly trust in core statistics. And markets, policymakers, the public,
investors,
everybody, we have to have a place to start from, and trusted statistics are utterly essential. Once you introduce new levels of uncertainty to a market, two things happen. Speculators will move in. Uncertainty is a way to make or lose money really quickly. But other, more sober operators don't like it. If you've got the choice of moving into a market that's full of uncertainty, where you don't even have the basic raw figures to make any business decisions on, you're going to find somewhere else.
And let's not be under any illusion. This is exactly the kind of thing Farage has begun to moot wanting to do here in the UK if he wins the next election. He has talked about, getting rid of people in the civil service and replacing them with his mates from the city, business people who know how to run things, blah, 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 blah. Much, much more political appointments than we traditionally have here in the UK civil service. And, wouldn't be surprised if he wanted the ONS headed up by, one of his golf club board mates who'd been a trader. It's really damaging and worrying and straight out of Trump's playbook, most of what he echoes on a daily basis. But I think on this particular aping of Doge and everything he knows goes well with a base who feel that the system doesn't work for them, that he will seek to do all of that and more if he ever gets the keys to number 10. And we've all got to try and prevent that at all costs, because otherwise we're going to end up looking like a poor America.
Oh, my goodness me, yes. Well, one of the best things about Trump, in as much, and I'm working hard using the word best here, but is the fact that the chaos, there are people behind the scenes who are doing things very deliberately, and they will have a plan of some sort, even though it might not look like that to the rest of us. But Trump is the front man. And as the sort of the ringmaster of the circus up to a point, no, maybe not, maybe the head clown, that might be a more accurate description of him. Doesn't need to put any more makeup on his face anyway. Big red nose. But there's an experiment going on in real time over there. this idea of change things, break things, change them, break them again, change them and break them a third time is very useful for those of us who live in countries where we are seeing more and more political pressure from people who see the opportunities that Trump has created for a very small group of people, very small group of businesses and individuals. And what he's doing is providing us with evidence that we just have to keep using to stop this sort of horrible unraveling getting any worse in this country.
You talked about individuals there, and there is one who seems to be benefiting from their association with Trump in the form of Ghislaine Maxwell. Been moved to a lower security prison. Obviously, Epstein files have not been released. What's the latest on all of that, Kenny? I confess I've not kept up too much with it this week.
There's nothing to keep up with. She's playing game behind the scenes. It should be crazy if she wasn't trying to get a pardon from him. The political optics of it are as challenging as they've been since we first started discussing these things. I think the key point isn't so much the details around what's happening with Maxwell herself at the moment. I think the thing to bear in mind is that the crazy-ass distractions that we're seeing will, up to a point, quite often be very deliberate ploys to stop us and the media in general talking about the Epstein scandal. It's the one thing that really threatens to sink Trump amongst his core supporter base at the very least. So that it's not going to go away, but the crazy-ass distractions are just going to get crazier and crazier. This week it was, we're going to send a couple of nuclear-powered submarines to loiter around Russia just in case.
Now, I'd love to get your view on that. So Medvedev did a tweet. Trump said he didn't like it, felt that it was a threat, and used that as the excuse to relocate 2 US submarines into the region. Not sure whether they are nuclear weapon submarines or nuclear fueled submarines. Is this because Medvedev is still seen as the only real successor to Putin if he pops off this mortal coil? And so Trump's sort of more anxious in a way about what Medvedev might be saying than other political figures.
This is an interesting take, and I'm not altogether sure Trump would think that far in advance, to be honest. My initial take on it was that, these submarines, if they're at sea, they're on maneuvers of some sort anyway. They don't just park them up and everybody goes for a beer at sundown. We have no way of knowing whether actually he has moved a couple of submarines over towards the Russian side of the globe or not. It's not like the American defense world is going to give us coordinates to say, this is where they are. So really, he can say whatever he wants. He's not got a great track record when it comes to, transparency, accuracy, honesty, whatever.
Yeah.
So it may well be that, yes, there are submarines there. It may well be that those submarines have been there for some time. Medvedev himself isn't likely to be the thing that's top of Trump's list of concerns. He's got so much more on his plate at this point in time. The Chinese curse, isn't it? May you live in interesting times.
Quiet riot.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Quiet riot.
Next up, Kenny, let's talk about positive discrimination. This week, the UK government unveiled a bold and controversial initiative, a new civil service internship scheme exclusively for working class university students, designed to fast track them towards that prestigious civil service fast stream. Applicants will be assessed based on their parents' occupations at age 14. So jobs like plumbers, van drivers, retail assistants as one of the eligibility criteria. Successful interns will then gain these high-profile placements across departments, broad mentoring, and this direct path towards leadership roles that have long been disproportionately dominated by middle-class graduates. And the move comes amid renewed criticism of the civil service's socioeconomic composition. So to give you some numbers around it, about 10% of fast stream recruits come from working class backgrounds currently, despite working class people making up about a third of the UK workforce. Now, critics, and of course, Badenoch, first out of the traps on it, accuse the scheme of reverse elitism, arguing it could undermine meritocracy by pre-screening applications based on defined class criteria. Supporters, like trade unions, social mobility advocates, are arguing that this is precisely the point, to get rid of that entrenched bias that has excluded bright candidates who lack the social capital or confidence and connections, etc., to get their foot in the door in the first place. Others warn it could inadvertently exclude people from complex and mixed socioeconomic backgrounds who don't fit neatly into defined categories or who come from certain kinds of disadvantage but less validated, quote unquote, backgrounds. Now, look, clearly civil service reform has entered a new phase with this, and the policy lights the fuse on wider debates about institutional diversity and fairness and opportunity of outcome, not just equality of opportunity, and signals that the government wants to send to the public about who belongs in government, in public service, in the civil service. So today, let's ask, does this kind of officious class filter actually level the playing field, or does it create new exclusions? And if it works, what does that mean for how we define merit and talent and equality of opportunity?
Civil servants are grown like oak trees, not mustard and cress. They bloom and ripen with the seasons. They mature like
yourself.
Well, I was about to say like an old port.
Like Grimsby, perhaps.
Henny, I'd love your view on it. I've got quite mixed views and some lived experience and other things to draw on. But what do you think's happening?
It was quite interesting. When I first saw the headline, I thought, oh, hey up. We got a firestorm here, haven't we? This is positive discrimination at the heart of the system. And this is going to create all sorts of problems. And when you scratch under the surface, 200 people a year that can get onto this scheme. You know, this in a civil service that's populated by, I can't remember the figures, hundreds of thousands of people who are employed. So if you are lucky enough to be born into a relatively poor household, well, you know, take your luck where you can get it. You might be one of 200 people that could go onto this scheme. Now, it's an internship. Doesn't guarantee you anything other than if you're good at it, then you'll get on to the next phase. It's kind of like a fast track onto the next fast track. So it's not really excluding any meaningful number of people at all. It is offering a leg up to those 200 people who might otherwise have no chance of breaking in to the civil service or might not think they've got a chance.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's helping them fast track onto another fast track scheme, which might eventually lead to them getting a job of some sort in the civil service.
Well, my view is that where actual discrimination exists, you do need positive discrimination to fix it. So it's all about proportionality when it comes to positive discrimination in my mind. So as somebody who grew up during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, we needed positive discrimination in areas like policing so that one half of the community could have faith in the entire justice system. And having positive discrimination to get Catholics into the Northern Ireland Police Service that replaced the Royal Ulster Constabulary was a very important part of the Good Friday Agreement and freezing a conflict that had caused bloodshed for decades and decades and decades. When you look at the end of apartheid South Africa, again, you had absolutely very, very real, tangible discrimination against Black people happening, and you needed positive discrimination to overcome it. And then there's the impact on public policy. And left-wing economist and multimillionaire from extremely working class background, Gary Stevenson, will say that, look, I went to the most prestigious schools for economics. He went to the LSE and then Oxford. And he said, if you are a brilliant economist from an incredibly poor background, you will be tempted to go into the city to make your millions, to help your family out, to buy them a house, give your siblings a leg up if you can. And if you are a brilliant economist from a very wealthy background, you can afford to go into the civil service, into think tanks, into the charity sector. And so the places where policy gets developed are much more likely to be the kinds of places where rich people who don't necessarily understand the real struggle of those with very little end up being. So I agree with him on that. We do need more people who get it, not just at the political level, and we do have an extremely working class cabinet at the moment when you analyse, how many of them came from genuinely impoverished households before getting their foot on the ladder into the world of politics and now sit around the cabinet table. We need them in other positions, in the civil service, in the think tanks that come up with the policy solutions to try and address the galloping inequality we've got in the country. And without lived experience, or without at least some staff who know exactly what poverty smells like, what damp actually tastes like in your mouth when you walk into a home that has got mold all over it and windows that let the freezing cold air in, and black spots climbing the walls. Can you really, really understand what is needed to turn things around? So, I welcome it from that perspective, but it is tricky. It is really, really tricky. And the barriers to entry for people from underprivileged backgrounds into a whole range of industries, not least civil service, public service, government, are not just whether or not you can get through the interview and write the perfect application and pass the quite difficult tests that get set for you. It's also about whether you can afford to take up that job. I know the government are trying to move a lot of these jobs outside of London, but the vast majority of them remain here. And rent prices and travel costs will exclude so many people, even if they do pass the test to get on the internship and manage to get their foot in the door that way. So I've known people turn jobs down because they couldn't afford to do the job.
Mike Wood, the Conservative shadow cabinet office minister, got straight onto social media and said that no young person should be told they're not welcome based solely on leftist social engineering. Now, leftist social engineering or giving 200 people a leg up, I think it's fair to say that, if you're born into an underprivileged background and you get a little bit of a help up and you view that as being social engineering from the left, it would probably be legitimate to say if you're lucky enough to be born into a more privileged background and you get a cracking education and doors open for you, that's social engineering as well. That's a system existing to keep the system ticking over,
Absolutely. Look, we need comprehensive education. This is one of the things that I've completely changed my mind on. I am somebody who probably thought grammar schools in principle were a good thing. Oh, if you're bright and have got no money, of course you should get to go to a good school. But I've now educated myself and realized that all that does is cream skim and makes all of the other schools in the local area crap. We need a comprehensive education system. We look to Finland, we look to South Korea, to other places where everybody gets a good education regardless. And that's why I very much welcome VAT on private schools and things like that.
Yeah. And I think there's a point that's worth making here is that really drives home what you're saying here, Naomi, is that across Britain, I think it's something like 7% of the whole population are privately educated. In the civil service, I dug this figure out, 59% are privately educated. It's a huge disparity.
Yeah.
And to echo what you were saying a few minutes ago about getting a wider range of people in, what this sort of approach does is it means that the civil service becomes a teensy tiny morsel-sized bit more representative of the people that it's supposed to be serving. And that's a fundamentally good idea. And I really emphasize that they're not huge figures that are involved here.
No, they're not. But I suppose where government starts, others can follow. So things like, having certain employment standards that are, so investors and people. There we go. That's a good example. That starts out as a government thing to get an IIP recognition as an employer. We've met all of these standards and offerings to our employees and promises to them. And once government starts doing it, you then see the private sector saying, well, maybe we should do it too. And then this whole industry is created around investors and people and employers going for that recognition and that award so that they can put that badge on their website. And when people are applying to them, they use it as look, come and work for us because we've got an investors and people recognition award. So, of course, government probably hopes that private sector will follow suit. And many times private sector has been ahead of government on some of this. I know that a lot of law firms do a lot of positive discrimination and really intensive outreach to particularly Black community to try and get more Black lawyers into the upper and, feeling able to apply for what is perceived as an incredibly white upper middle class career progression trajectory.
And I think you've not stumbled on it, but you're making a point there that there's a broader point to be made, and that's something else that occurred to me when I saw the headline was, hello, what we've got here is something that is now fundamentally a good idea, I think, but we should not forget that it's dealing with a symptom of a much bigger set of problems. If you want kids to be able to do this, educate them properly in the first place.
Exactly. Nobody asks to be born into the family in which they are born. None of us asks to be born. It is no one's fault if they're born into a working class family, middle class family, royal family, right? It is not your choice as a child to be judged on the efforts or merits or unfortunate circumstances of your parents. And I do understand that some middle class children will be feeling like, I didn't get asked to be born to my, GP mom and lawyer dad. And why should this not benefit me? And why should this be another avenue close to me in a world of shrinking jobs anyway because of AI? And so I understand the frustration, but as you have reinforced, this is about completely changing the system. We just have to try and get rid of entrenched privilege and level the playing field for everybody, because at the moment it isn't. I get so many people writing to me at Best for Britain saying, please, can I have an internship? I'll work for free. You don't have to pay me. And we have implemented a policy over the last few years of saying, absolutely not. We do not offer unpaid internships to anyone, because all that would do would be to ensure that the only people that we ever took on were those that could afford to work for us in the first place. And I don't need that kind of thinking in my organization. I need to have as broad a pool of talent coming through as I possibly can be lucky enough to get my hands on.
Yeah, and it's important to value people. If you don't value the people that you're bringing on board, they're not going to value you. Then why should they?
Exactly.
I remember one of the guys that worked with me back in my Metro days, he went on to great things, and he headed up Huffington Post in Britain. Stephen, I won't use his second name because he will never want to be reminded of this. But HuffPo at its peak was, it was a cracking operation. It was doing good work, huge audiences. And they got into a bit of controversy because people realized that HuffPo were getting a lot of content from people who weren't being paid. And, a lot of folk are quite happy just to produce content and, stick it on the CV. Anyway, Stephen went on Radio 4 to defend this policy. And his choice of words was a bit unfortunate. What he was trying to say, I think, was that it's good that people really want to work with us. But he said, I'm proud that we don't pay people because that shows how valuable an organization we are. He hadn't finished the sentence before you could hear Twitter just going into full-on eruption mode. So it's not, it's not a new problem, but it is one that you've got to treat with kid gloves, because giving opportunities the wrong way can create worse problems than not giving opportunities at all. It's not an easy world when it comes to these sort of decisions sometimes.
No, but it's another reason why here at Quiet Riot we pay our guests, and we pay them as well as we can afford to, because they're helping to provide great content, and we value that, and we want them to know that we value it, and we want them to come back. So unless somebody's using us to hawk their wares, their book, whatever it is, we will pay them, and I think we pay above the market rate for that.
We do.
Long may that continue.
Treat others as you treat yourself. You'd rather be treated yourself, and treat people with dignity.
In fact, there was a time I was doing some podcasting and not getting paid, and then they grew a bit and were able to start paying their contributors, and they said, we can pay you 50 quid a show or whatever, and I said, I don't know, then I'll be forced into doing a tax return that I don't currently do at the moment because I only have PAYE income, or maybe I won't bother, it's fine, I've been doing it this long without being paid for it, I quite enjoy it. And my late dad said to me, take the money, because if you continue to do it for free, they won't value you.
Absolutely right. And I'm willing to bet good money that the people who were offering you 50 quid were making profits themselves off lots of people like you. I hope they're not burning in too hot a corner of hell, but I hope it's a little bit toasty. Greedy buggers.
Quiet Riot.
They say to only bring what you can carry. So with the all-new 2025 Ford Expedition Tremor, bring a lot. Like 3 dirt bikes, a few tents, an entire crew ready to make memories. A panoramic 24-inch display, and the confidence to push your limits. The all-new 2025 Ford Expedition Tremor.
Always consult the owner's manual before off-road driving. Know your terrain and trail difficulty, and use appropriate safety gear. Max payload varies based on accessories and vehicle configuration. See label on door jamb for carrying capacity of a specific vehicle. Always properly secure cargo.
Quiet Riot.
Our friend Luke Trill, hello Luke, I hope you're listening, over at More in Common, asked a very important poll question this week. He asked Brits what moment they would pick for where things all went wrong for Britain. Now, for me, it was definitely 1978 when Scotland got kicked out of the Argentina World Cup, despite beating Holland.
The downhill since Kenny.
Oh, amazing. And great goal. And there was drug scandals, the whole shebang. Ali McLeod was the manager. Came back in shame. And that was it for me. That's when the country went into a nosedive. End of it. Never recovered. Now, other people take a slightly more nuanced view about the hinges of history that we swing upon. Reform and Tory voters say that Blair is to blame. Most people say Brexit, not surprisingly. And even 13% of Greens goes far back as to blame Thatcher, if you can remember her. Naomi, what do you make of all this?
Well, I think it's probably one of the most interesting questions that has been polled for a long time. And I mean, they were asked, Brexit, pandemic, austerity, financial crisis, etc., as options to choose from. And I was surprised how few people said the financial crash, because, of course, that precipitated austerity, which precipitated Brexit. There was this domino effect.
That's right.
And, of course, you could argue that Thatcherism and then New Labour and Mandelson saying we don't care how filthy rich you get to the bankers fueled the crash.
If you go down that route, I'm going to mention 1066 and the way the land is divided up.
But from a political perspective, it is fascinating. So you've got fewer than 22% of Brits believing the country is on the right track.
Oh, blimey.
So just that alone just tells you everything. Like, nobody really feels like we're headed in the right direction, apart from a fifth who I guess are doing all right for themselves.
That's roughly the number who are voting for reform, if we believe that the polls.
Indeed.
Draw your own conclusions.
And yeah, maybe they feel like even if we haven't arrived yet because of the wind in Farage's sails, they'll get to the place that they're happy with sooner rather than later. But you've got 60% believing it's on the wrong track and a plurality, so about a third identifying the 2016 referendum as the defining error, the moment of, the point of no return for Britain's demise. And why do I think this is particularly interesting at the moment? Well, with the fracturing left across yet another new party, with Corbyn and Sultana heading up whatever it is their party's going to be called, if they were to make rejoining the EU a feature of their efforts, and come on, given how low energy Corbyn's campaign was during the 2016 referendum, perhaps this is very unlikely. But if they were to be very politically opportunistic and try and hurt Labour even more, I think coming out for rejoining the EU could put quite a big dent in that vote share. And yes, we have Greens, Lib Dems, SNP, Plaid Cymru, even the Rejoin Party in existence, all on a broadly very pro-European platform and rejoin when the time is right kind of policy messaging. But I don't think that they will shove the Overton window on the issue of Europe in quite the same way as a party born out of the Labour movement like Corbyn and Sultana. So look, they may well not. The London Economic wrote up a piece earlier in the week saying that they might do. I don't put too much store in that gossip yet, but I am fascinated that A, the question's been asked, that B, most people don't think we're on the right track, and C, that Brexit is seen by the plurality of respondents as the defining reason as to where it all went wrong. And if I were Corbyn and Sultana, I would be looking at that and thinking, okay, well, the unions have now come to the table on Europe. I mean, many of them were there already anyway, but some weren't. We know that Brexit has been a complete disaster for the economy, for jobs, for cost of living. And these are people who could, put a real dent in Labour vote share if they were to say, go on then, we'll stand on a rejoin platform.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm torn on the Corbyn question. I can't decide whether Corbyn throwing his weight behind a pro-European movement of any sort is just too bizarre, given how keen he wants to get us out of Europe.
Well, I certainly think it could hurt the Green Party because particularly if Zach Plansky wins the leadership, that will be seen as an even more left version of itself than it does at the moment. And if you are a former Corbynite, but very strongly pro-European and have long since left the Labour Party for the Greens in terms of how you vote, if not membership, and then all of a sudden Corbyn and Sultana, I guess Sultana could much more authentically claim to be pro-European than Corbyn, would come up and say it, then that might really hurt Green vote share.
That was kind of the sort of second half of my being torn in Corbyn, though. The point one, it's weird that he's perhaps want to take such a pro-European stance. But on the flip side, if you're a Corbyn supporter listening to this, you might quite legitimately say to me, hang on a second, Kenny, the fact that Jeremy Corbyn is now coming over to the European side, he's one of them coming over to our side, is actually a much more positive message than somebody who's spent the last 10 years banging on about the importance of remaining in the European Union might be. So there's probably a little bit more nuance in the arguments to be had. But, look, it's encouraging to see any sort of discussion of this nature.
The polling question that I'd been mulling over asking, and I mentioned at the top of the show, and we didn't quite have the funding to do it, but I wanted to ask people to tell me about the last time they felt happy and secure and that life was going okay for them.
Oh, I love being in the womb.
Well, indeed. And I'm sure, because of the nostalgia that is so engulfing those on the right of the country, it'll be, or when I were a lad kind of stuff, in the good old days when we didn't vaccinate people and polio was rife and house prices were low. But, I do think it would be very, very interesting to see how different age cohorts pinpoint when they felt that actually life was better than it is now. And I think this is maybe a more accurate way of polling it that Luke Choll has done by saying pinpoint when you think it all started to unravel.
Or indeed, for younger generations in particular, has there ever been a point that you can recall when you thought life was tickety-boo?
I think 97 to 2001 in my lifetime was the standout era. Did go, pretty downhill after that with the Iraq War and other things. But it did feel to me, in the UK certainly, that period of time was very exciting. Russia was beginning to become more liberalized and Western. China was certainly opening up and becoming much more liberal on things like trade. We'd had the fall of the Berlin Wall, and Europe was coming together and coalescing around a much more open and democratic outlook. The economy was growing. It felt to me like you could feel things were going to change in terms of rights for LGBT communities and the whole Britpop era and the UK being seen as quite a cool place. That, as I was coming of age, really did feel like, okay, maybe things are going to be really, really good. And obviously for a while they were. But I can't really pinpoint any other point that I've been happy.
If there's anybody listening who's willing to bang a few grand to Best for Brit to get this question asked, please do. I'd like to study the cross breaks, because one of the things, because the late 90s, lethal impact for a lot of us, but of course we were all sort of teenage 20s, maybe early 30s for some people at that stage, a stage of life where you've either decided to sort of become a miserable gay, or your life is starting to take shape in some form or another, and you're as optimistic as you're going to be just because you're at that stage of life anyway.
And we weren't quite so terrified about climate change then, even though we probably should have been.
Oh, blissful ignorance. Absolutely blissful ignorance. We'd forgotten about the Cold War. We weren't going to be destroyed by a nuclear bomb, and the sun wasn't cooking as yet. And we in this country hadn't really heard of Donald Trump either. Oh, they were halcyon times.
Right, Kenny, we should wrap it up.
Yeah. Good. Well, as another Sunday school draws to a very well-mannered close, Naomi, fab to chat. I'm going to go and watch some Formula One with a bit of luck, and maybe, just maybe, get some Topsham beer happiness down my throat as well, because the sun's out.
All right, steady on, soldier. We've got to thank everybody first. Listeners, thank you, as always, for spending some time with us today and for interacting with us on Blue Sky and on our Discord feed and everywhere else you manage to get in touch with us.
And don't forget to sign up to ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod to get access to live chats, that Discord channel that Naomi just mentioned, and a whole lot more as well.
And if you can't stretch to that, you can still help us by sharing your favourite episode with a friend. The next episode will be our regular Thursday extravaganza, of course.
Feel free to say nice things or to lob sarky observations our way on Blue Sky. You know who you all are. And remember, we love you lots.
Bye!
Quite Right is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangita. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quite Right is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot. Still not going to attract that many that can afford to do this. And sorry, Wrigley is really kicking off here.
Is Wrigley working class, or has he got a privileged background?
Wrigley. Go on, Wrigley. He's now being dragged out like that little girl who interrupted that interview. Do you remember ever. During lockdown, her dad was, and she stormed in, like dancing away. Daddy, I'm going to be on TV too. And then the mum and the little sibling come in.
Today's podcast was brought to you by Naomi, Kenny, and a big bowl of Bonio.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.